She was 9 years old, unarmed, walking home from school, and in less than 30 seconds, she was on the ground, screaming. Officer Garrett Bishop would later call it procedure. But what he didn't know was who that little girl's mother really was. Why did Officer Bishop's K9 attack a child? Why did backup arrive so late? And how did one mother's military past turn the balance of power in her own neighborhood upside down? By the end of this story, you'll see why the footage from that night was buried, and why the truth refused to stay hidden. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Mara stood by the kitchen window, watching the last rays of day fade behind the pines. Her daughter, Lily, sat at the small table near the open door, sketching. Bright red cardinals and sparrows, wings outstretched in flight. The pencil tip wandered across the page, paused, pressed lightly. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked in the distance, and the scent of fresh grass and evening air drifted through the screen door. Mara felt the tension in her chest. Since returning from deployment 6 months ago, silence always carried a weight. That day had begun like any other. Lily came home from school humming, backpack bouncing, talkative about her art class and the bluebird she saw in the yard. Mara packed up her uniform, still crisp, and folded it with care. The house smelled of coffee and old wood floors. She glanced at a framed photograph of her late husband, his military beret tilted, Lily's tiny hand holding his finger. She traced his face quietly, then turned to greet Lily with a soft smile. Across town, Officer Jackson Reeve adjusted his patrol cap under the streetlight. He'd been praised in his precinct for decisive action, for calm in crisis. But behind that resolve, there were rumors. Colleagues saying he pushed hard, held grudges, sometimes crossed lines. He drove through quiet neighborhoods, scanner crackling in the background, possible disturbance at Glenfield Street. He flicked on the dashcam and rolled toward the address. Lily left the house on her usual path, humming to her toy cardinal keychain that dangled at her zipper. The sidewalks were calm, dusk shadows stretching long across concrete. She paused, eyes scanning branches above. A soft breeze ruffled her hair. She whispered, "Did you see any birds today, Mr. Cardinal?" and swung the chain lightly as she walked. Meanwhile, Reeve turned the corner quietly. His cruiser slowed. His canine partner, Rex, growled low behind the barrier. Reeve's heart rate rose. He spoke into his radio. "I'm going to check it out." He gestured for Rex to stay calm, but his hand hovered near the leash. Lily's steps echoed. In that fragile moment, the air held its breath. The night was closing in, and soon, a decision would shatter every life it touched. It was supposed to be a quiet Friday evening, the kind that ends with dinner leftovers, a warm shower, and a little girl humming to herself as the sun slips away behind the trees. But on the corner of Westfield Avenue, under the dull orange glow of a flickering streetlight, an encounter began that would leave a community questioning everything they believed about safety, justice, and what it really means to protect and serve. Her name was Nyla Ellison, 12 years old, soft-spoken, carrying a sketch pad covered in pencil smudges and drawings of birds she dreamed of one day seeing up close. She wasn't the kind of kid who got into trouble. She loved to read, to draw, to chase sunlight with her pencil and paper. Every week she walked the same route home from school, past the playground, over the small bridge, and through the narrow path that curved behind the park fence. It was quiet there, peaceful, a shortcut that saved her 3 blocks of walking. Her mom always warned her, "Stick to the sidewalk, honey." But that evening, something made her turn toward that path again. Maybe it was the sound of crickets humming in rhythm. Maybe the way the light slipped through the trees like a memory she didn't want to forget. Whatever it was, that choice would change everything. As Nyla approached the curve near the park, she heard tires crunching on gravel. A police cruiser rolled up beside her, headlights cutting through the dusk and glinting off the sketch pad she held close to her chest. Inside sat Officer Rick Branson, 10 years on the force, a veteran with a reputation for getting things done. decorated, respected. But those who knew him best whispered something else, that he could be quick to act, slow to listen. His dash cam flickered to life, recording the moment. A child walking alone. A denim jacket. A hum so faint it was almost swallowed by the sound of the engine. Then a voice came through his radio. Unit 47, possible trespasser near Westfield Park perimeter. Static. Then silence. Branson squinted through the windshield. He pressed the button on his radio. I see her approaching. The dispatcher replied, Copy that. Proceed with caution. He exhaled slowly, hand tightening on the leash draped over the console. In the back seat, his K9 partner Shadow stirred, a low growl vibrating in the dark. The street was empty, the night was still, and there was no reason for what came next. Nyla stopped walking. The cruiser door opened. Branson stepped out, calm, practiced, the kind of calm that comes from years of authority. Hey, kid, he said, you live around here? His tone was light, but something in his eyes wasn't. Nyla clutched her sketchpad. Yes, sir, just heading home. Branson tilted his head slightly. You sure about that? You cutting through private property? She shook her head. No, sir, just the park path. Shadow barked once. Low, sharp, immediate. Branson glanced back. Easy, boy. But he didn't sound at ease. The space between them thickened. An invisible line neither wanted to cross. Nyla took a step back, looking toward the faint outline of her neighborhood down the street. I can just go, sir. My house is right there. Branson's jaw flexed. Stay where you are. His voice had changed. No longer calm, no longer human, almost mechanical. He unlatched the door, and the K9 jumped down, tail stiff, nose catching something only it understood. Shadow barked again, louder, sharper, echoing off the brick walls. Nyla froze. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't do anything. Her words carried into the wind, small, afraid, fading. Branson's hand hovered near the release clip. In his head, the words from dispatch played again. Possible trespasser. Routine words, harmless until they weren't. And in that split second, something in him broke. He unclipped the leash, and everything erupted. Barking, screaming, gravel flying, the chaos of commands overlapping. Stop! Get back! Off! A child's voice crying out. Then silence. Only the faint buzz of the cruiser radio, still asking for a response that would never come. By the time the paramedics arrived, Branson's body camera had gone dark. The report said, technical malfunction. But the footage that survived was enough to spark outrage, enough to force the department into a wall of statements and half-truths. Witnesses said they heard screaming, short, desperate, ending too soon. Nyla was found barely conscious, sketchpad torn, pencil snapped clean in half. Branson stood over her, pale, shaking. Dispatch, I need medical now. But his next words, they were never recorded. And that's what makes this story so haunting. Because everyone asks the same question. What makes a man sworn to protect, destroy what he's meant to defend? Was it fear? Pride? A moment of confusion? Or something deeper? Something he'd carried long before that night? If you're still here, drop a comment saying, I'm still here. Because this story it's not just about one mistake. It's about trust, power, and how fragile both can be when the people holding them forget who they're meant to serve. And if it were your child, your sister, your neighbor, would you ever see the world the same again? The morning after the attack, the city woke up to headlines that no one could ignore. Officer defends K9 release, standard procedure, police say. But to anyone who had seen the aftermath, there was nothing standard about it. News anchors replayed the same photo over and over again. A small shoe on the asphalt, red-stained and torn. Social media erupted in outrage. Yet as quickly as the story began spreading, something strange started happening. Posts disappeared. Local outlets stopped mentioning the girl's name. It was as if someone wanted the world to forget. But one person refused to. Maya Ellison. When she walked into the hospital and saw her daughter's small body wrapped in gauze and trembling in pain, something inside her went quiet, too quiet. People who had served beside her overseas said they recognized that look before, the look of someone who had been pushed too far. While the department scrambled to control the narrative, Maya began asking questions. Why was the footage from the officer's chest cam missing? Why did dispatch logs show a delay in response? And why did the report claim Nyla lunged forward aggressively when doctors confirmed she never moved an inch before the attack? Each question was met with polite smiles, careful pauses, and rehearsed lines. "We're still reviewing the evidence, ma'am." But behind closed doors, there were whispers among the force. Someone high up wanted this buried, fast, because this wasn't just about a mistake. It was about protecting reputations, careers, and pensions. And the cost of that protection was the truth itself. The first protest began quietly, a few neighbors standing outside the precinct, holding cardboard signs with Nyla's name written in blue marker. Within a week, the crowd doubled. Within 2, the mayor called for calm. But calm wasn't what Maya wanted. She wanted answers. Then one evening, an envelope slid under her apartment door. No name, no note. Just a USB drive taped to a folded piece of paper. She stared at it for hours before finally plugging it in. Dashcam footage, the missing footage. But this version was different. No edits, no missing frames, no cuts. For the first time, she saw exactly what happened, and who had really given the command to release the K9. The voice wasn't Branson's. It was deeper, older, calm. The voice of authority, someone watching from a second patrol car parked down the street, and in that moment, everything clicked. Branson hadn't acted alone. This wasn't negligence, it was intent. A training exercise gone wrong, a cover-up designed to erase every trace of it. And Maya realized she wasn't just fighting one officer, she was fighting an entire system built to protect itself, no matter the cost. How would you have felt standing in her shoes, knowing the truth but watching everyone around you pretend it never happened? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have done what Maya did next? Take matters into your own hands. The drive was quiet that night. Maya's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than she realized. The hum of the engine, the only sound in the car. She wasn't driving home. She was driving toward the truth. The USB drive sat on the passenger seat beside her, sealed in a plain envelope marked only with a single letter, R. She didn't know who had sent it, but she knew what it might contain. And if what she suspected was true, this wasn't just about her daughter anymore. It was about something far bigger. When she reached her garage, she locked the doors, dimmed the lights, and powered up her old military laptop, the same one she'd used overseas to decode mission reports. It was slow, but secure. She inserted the USB and waited. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, a single file appeared. 10/22/24 Cam 2 Original. Her heartbeat grew louder in her ears. The footage was rough, shaky, grainy, but she could make out the street corner, the cruiser headlights, and her daughter's small frame walking along the sidewalk. The timestamp confirmed it, 6:43 p.m., the same time the report claimed Branson had issued verbal commands to comply. Maya turned up the volume. That's when she heard it. A man's voice in the background, calm, almost casual. "Make it quick, Branson." The sound hit her like a gunshot. It wasn't Branson giving the order. He was taking it. The man speaking wasn't in the frame, but Maya recognized that tone instantly. It was the same voice from the leaked dispatch recordings earlier that week. The voice of Captain Harris, Branson's commanding officer. The man who later signed off the no misconduct found report. The truth was right there. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Maya leaned back, her eyes burning. For a long moment, she said nothing. She just stared at the frozen frame on her screen, her daughter's terrified face seconds before impact. She whispered under her breath, "They knew." And then it hit her. The command, "Make it quick." It wasn't about neutralizing a threat. It was about sending one. A warning meant for Maya herself, a message to a veteran who had filed multiple complaints against that same department 2 years earlier, after witnessing misconduct during a joint training operation. This wasn't random. It was revenge, disguised as procedure. The very people sworn to uphold the law had weaponized it against her family. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she replayed the footage again and again, writing down every timestamp, every voice, every gap in the audio. She knew what had to come next, but it wouldn't be through the courts. Not yet. She'd tried that before, and watched every case she brought quietly disappear. That night she made one call. No lawyers, no reporters, just a voice she hadn't heard in years. "This is Ellison," she said softly. "I need a favor." The reply came almost immediately, low, steady. "You found something, didn't you?" Maya paused. "I found proof." That moment changed everything. The mother who had once begged for justice now understood something the system never wanted her to. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the inside, and for the first time since the attack, and she wasn't afraid. She was focused. You can't watch that kind of truth unfold and remain the same person. And I have to ask you, if it were your child and you uncovered a secret like that, what would you have done next? Would you stay quiet and hope the system corrected itself? Or would you do what Maya was about to do, something that would make the entire city remember her name? They said 1 week later that peace would return. But instead, the protest erupted. What began as a silent, outraged vigil outside the precinct doors turned into chaos. Shouts, flashing cameras, lines of police shields glistening in the rain. The city that once whispered in disbelief now roared in anger. Officer Branson was immediately suspended. No badge, no patrol car, just silence from the department. But then, he vanished. No press conference, no forwarding address, just gone. And in that silence, people began to wonder, who was really protecting who? Maya sat beside Nyla's hospital bed, her eyes hollow, her mind heavy with questions that no one dared to answer. The monitors beeped steadily beside her. The room smelled of disinfectant and wilted flowers left by well-meaning neighbors. Her daughter's small hand rested inside hers, bandaged, trembling, still marked with the weight of that night. Then her phone buzzed. An unmarked email. No subject line, just a single attachment from a journalist she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then opened it. The file loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, and what she saw changed everything. It was a video, internal communications, orders from department heads, instructions to suppress evidence, a trail of signatures and timestamps, a chain of command reaching far beyond what anyone imagined. She sat frozen, watching faces she once trusted issue commands she'd never believed possible. The corruption wasn't a crack in the system. It was the system. The rot didn't start at the bottom. It began at the roots and ran all the way to the top. In the days that followed, the national news cycle ignited. Every major outlet ran the story. Every talking head had a theory. And for the first time, the footage of Nyla's case wasn't just a tragedy. It was evidence. Evidence that sparked outrage across cities, across states, across dinner tables where families watched in disbelief. Because this was no longer just about one officer or one little girl. It was about the entire machine and the people willing to break it to protect themselves. 6 months later, a search party hiking off a remote trail made a discovery that reignited everything. They found Branson's K9, Shadow, alive, but emaciated. Curled near a stream, collar rusted, fur matted. And attached to that collar was a small metal tag, engraved with just 3 chilling words. He followed orders. Those words spread like wildfire. They appeared on protest signs, on murals, on T-shirts, in courtroom hallways. They became a statement, a reminder, a wound. Because he followed orders wasn't just about one dog. It was about every person who looked away, every system that chose silence over truth. Justice, if it ever came, would come slowly. But a message had already been delivered, And it wasn't just to those wearing uniforms, it was to everyone watching, from their homes, from the sidelines, from behind screens. A message that whispered, the truth can be buried, but it cannot stay hidden forever. So let me ask you, how do you feel now, after hearing all of this? If it were your child, your friend, your community, would you accept what the system offers, or would you demand the harder road? Because sometimes silence isn't peace, and sometimes peace only begins when someone refuses to stay quiet. This case split the nation. It changed conversations in classrooms, in courtrooms, in city halls. It reshaped how every use of force incident would be recorded, forever. Because after Nyla's story surfaced, nothing about policing looked the same again. Body cams were no longer just a formality, they became lifelines, and every officer on the street knew that the world was now watching. But even after all of that, after the reforms, after the statements, after the promises, a question still lingers. Was justice ever really served? You see, justice isn't just about arrests or trials. It's about truth. Truth that doesn't get redacted, reshaped, or conveniently forgotten. And when you look closely at this story, at the cover-ups, the missing footage, the silences between reports, you have to wonder, was this accountability? Or was it just damage control dressed up to look like progress? Because somewhere out there, a mother still visits a hospital room that feels frozen in time. Somewhere, an officer still wakes up to the echo of a command he can't take back. And somewhere, a community still carries the weight of a promise that never came true. So I'll ask you, what's your take? When systems fail, when power bends the truth, what does justice even mean? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every single one. Every story like this deserves a voice, and yours matters more than you think. And if you thought this story was intense, wait until you hear what happened in The Day the Sheriff Vanished. Because that one doesn't just question the system, it questions everything we believe about who's really in control. Subscribe now so you never miss what's coming next.